My name is Richard August, and I'll be your host. Our guest is Susan Donovan, a Democrat who has represented District 69 in Bristol and Portsmouth since being elected in November of 2016. Representative Donovan is a retired public school teacher and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Health and Physical Education and a Master's degree in School Administration from Rhode Island College. Welcome to State of the State.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
In his opening remarks, House Speaker Sakarchi noted that in the last session, a pay equity bill was passed and signed into law. You sponsored that bill, I believe, and to ensure pay equity for all employees, regardless of gender or ethnicity. Talk to us about that law. What exactly is meant by pay equity?
Well, equal pay for equal work wasn't working for Americans, and it hadn't been updated in over 50 years. And it was very difficult to litigate. If you brought one of those complaints up, you were more likely not to win because the language was so narrow. So this bill broadens that a little bit by using comparable work with similar skill level, similar responsibilities, and hopefully it'll do the trick. And I think there's a little bit more in the bill also, wage ranges and wage history. Our employers are not allowed to ask those kinds of questions. So it sort of levels the playing field when people go in for a job interview.
Can you give us examples of situations where pay inequity occurs? For example, it's obvious to me at least that professions such as teaching or even flight attendants, unionized positions, certainly women with the same seniority and level of education are being paid the same as men. But what are some of the examples where pay inequality exists?
You're right. I didn't experience pay inequity in my profession. I did early on when I took a coaching position and was just given a stipend, and I was given half as much as the man who had basically the same job, soccer, field hockey. But there's lots of examples. Women called me, emailed me. For instance, lawyers. I had a woman lawyer say to me, she took a job at a law firm, thought it was great. She had come from nonprofit and gone into a regular law firm. And unbeknownst to her, she was being paid thousands of dollars less than the males that were doing basically the same job. And when she asked, why am I being paid less than so-and-so? Well, you didn't ask for any more. And she said, well, she was asking now, oh, well, when your evaluation comes up, you can change that. Same, I had a college professor say to me that she was paid we're talking tens of thousands of dollars in some cases, less than people doing the same job that she was doing, because things are done in secret and with no transparency.
In the college professor's case, though, a lot of times, if a professor or an assistant or associate professor, whatever their level is, if they've published,
right,
so that factors into it. A person who comes in who has not done that, even though they may both have a PhD degree, that also factors into the equation. So when you talk about comparable, it's really, isn't that the difficult thing?
Well, there's language in there, yes, you're right. And if she did bring something forward, they would say, well, your education is different, your experience is different, your time spent doing such and such is different, you don't have enough. There are ways to, to look at things, but at least this bill gives people a chance. Not all would make it probably to the point where you'd have to report it to the Department of Labor or whatever, but.
Is that who govern it? Will it be the Department of Labor?
The Department of Labor is going to be in charge of that, yes.
Okay. You sponsored another bill last year that would allow patients to protect their privacy by having their health care mailings directed to themselves instead of a spouse or parent. Does this mean that the parents of a minor child might not see mailings that, no?
This was basically written to give adult children who are on their parents' insurance policies. For instance, I had my 25-year-old on my insurance policy when she was in between jobs. And I would get the estimation of benefits, EOBs or whatever they are. And then I thought to myself, why should I know? You know, did she have a, you know, an STD test? Not that she did, but say that came up. And I heard from doctors who treat college kids, and they would not seek mental health treatment. They would not seek STDs treatment because they were afraid their parents would find out. And those kids are adults. They deserve privacy. So that, you know, I brought that with that in mind. And then I also realized and was told that women or anyone in a domestic violence situation or a dangerous situation who is under someone else's health care plan that wanted privacy, they deserve to get it too. So that's what it's written for.
So it would only apply to people 18 years of age and over?
I don't know what the age is for privacy. That's a medical thing. It might be 16. I don't really understand. I don't know that answer. So
but, I mean, under 18, you're technically not an adult, so.
But in some cases, 16, you have the right to make certain decisions for your health care.
Okay. You also co-sponsored a law that to ensure effectiveness of child opportunity zones and another that bans conversion therapy for minors. But first of all, what is a child opportunity zone?
COZIs, they call them. Well, there was one in the school that I taught in. So child opportunity zones, they're before and after school care. They help with homework. They have a sliding scale on how much you pay according to what you make, what you earn. And they're lifesavers for lots of parents with school-age children. I know they open up like at 7 o'clock in the morning and they don't close until 6 o'clock at night. And some of those kids are there quite a long time.
What do you mean? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, so say what the bill was. It was like, that was one of my first
Child
ones.
opportunity zones refer to places where kids in school can get help before and after school. Is that?
And daycare, like daycare. Well,
okay.
Before and
Not
after
really...
school care. But it's also a place where they exercise, they're given snacks, they're helped with homework there. You know, it's you know, instead of going home and being a latchkey kid and sitting in front of the TV and locking the door before your parents come home.
Okay.
So we want those to be high quality.
Yep. Conversion therapy for minors. Tell us what that means.
I didn't even know this existed until I started to look into it with some other representatives. So there are places where you send a child that has come out as being LGBTQ, and they try to, you know, convert them or fix them through psychotherapy. And research tells us that's more damaging to a young person than anything else. And I've had experience with that. As a teacher, I mentored a child when I was teaching that was put out of the home because and refused to go through one of those at her church. And it's traumatizing. It's traumatizing and damaging, and no one should have to go through that.
So I was speaking to a mental health professional who specializes in children and teenagers especially, and he said that in his practice, gender dysphoria has become an epidemic among junior high school age girls, sometimes 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. He also said he was unwilling to come on this program to discuss the issue for fear of being blackballed by his colleagues. So conversion therapy, as you're describing it, would be an attempt to say to a young person, a school-age person that has, as you say, come out, to not come out or to reverse what they think they are at preteen and teen levels. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
If this is becoming an epidemic, this mental health professional, who I'm respecting their privacy because they said they're afraid of being, said that there's almost a tendency now among particularly, as I said, young girls, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade girls, that this transgender thing is becoming almost a badge of honor, and that they are saying that they are, but they really aren't.
I would say give it time. I mean, doing nothing, you know, but instead of trying to convince them that they're not. How do we know that? But I have read that it has become an epidemic, and that's troublesome. Can there be that many kids with this problem? You know, who knows? I don't, you know.
Well, at least
but I'm certainly not going to say,
who practices in Rhode Island.
Right,
so.
and I'm not going to second guess anybody that comes to me and says what, you know, how they feel.
Yep.
It's not me to judge. It's not for me to judge.
Governor McKee and Speaker Sicarci have identified affordable housing as a priority for spending. Politicians like to call it investing, of course,
Yes.
but a chunk of what I call the COVID relief cash that the federal government has given us. And you say on your website, and I'm going to quote, "The Assembly established the state's first permanent funding stream for affordable housing to help address the state's critical housing shortage," end of quote. Now, State Senator Sam Bell recently released a study that he says shows Rhode Island has failed to spend over $1 billion in funds available.
I saw that.
What is the relationship of affordable housing to available housing? Aren't they really two different things?
Yes. And then there's Section 8 housing, so to speak. It's, low-income housing. There's low-income housing, affordable housing. I don't know exactly what Sam meant by that, and I didn't look into it. All I know is we are going to address the housing crisis. It's everywhere, and it's not something that's just happened recently. This has been going on for years. My own children couldn't find housing. One that moved back to Rhode Island had a lot of trouble finding housing. I am really happy that we're finally addressing it. And there's a commission chaired by my colleague June Speakman, the other rep from Bristol and Warren. And at least we have to come up with some ways to alleviate this crisis. I think it goes back to our municipalities and zoning. We have a lot of restrictive zoning. You know, we spread out. We went from, you know, the core downtowns, and we spread out into neighborhoods, and it's so restrictive. We can't build multifamily houses. We can't build houses on top of one another. We can't, there's so much we can't do. So we're going to have to really brainstorm and find ways to build more housing, to increase our housing stock, so that my kids, our kids that want to stay in Rhode Island can stay in Rhode Island. What we're seeing now in Bristol is housing prices so high that local people can't afford to buy them, and everything is way out of whack right now.
It's a two-edged sword, though, isn't it? Because it seems to me when housing prices are increasing, that the net worth of people go up, and they're very happy about this, and especially if they take out a home equity loan, you can borrow a lot of money at low interest rates. On the other hand, when the housing market collapsed in 1990, there was all kinds of weeping and wailing, gnashing of teeth that, you know.
Everybody was a lot of people were underwater,
quote,
including
underwater,
one of my kids.
So that's exactly what happened. But increasing the supply, as long as interest rates stay down, what's important to people is how much I have to pay per month. Not really what the price of the house is. I mean, they look at the price and say, well, this is crazy. To be honest, in 1974, when we moved here, the house we bought was $42,500. The houses in the neighborhood are now going for $425,000. So part of that's a reflection of inflation, and part of it's the availability of cheap mortgage money at this point.
Yeah, and you can't blame contractors. You know, they want to put the biggest house on the lot that's possible to get the biggest bang for the buck. And in my neighborhood, I built a modest cape in my neighborhood. The houses that are being built across the street from me now are huge. You know, same size lot, but, you know, a lot bigger. So we have to, you know, and I think there's going to have to be incentives for contractors and for our cities and towns. We have to find a way to increase the housing stock and do it so that people can afford to live there. I don't know how we do that.
Well, is that the purpose of this commission is?
Yes, I think so. Well, yes.
Okay. Your website also says, quote, legislators authorize the designation of and I'm using the terms, housing czar to oversee housing initiatives and develop housing plans for the state. Has that person been named?
Yes.
And what exactly is his or her responsibilities?
I think recently been named. I have not delved into the description of that job, but and I hear that it's a very competent person. I knew the name last week. I didn't commit it to memory, but we need someone with some expertise in the field to come up with some ideas, and we have to throw them around and try to solve this problem.
Are they on the commission, or do they report to this commission you referred to, or are they a separate?
It's separate. I think this commission is looking at ideas, and I don't think this housing czar is going to be chair of the commission. There is a chair of the commission.
Isn't that kind of an overlap as you described it? How much power does this housing czar have? Are they going to be able to come into a local community and overrule their zoning requirements?
No, I think everything has to be legislated. I mean, I think not only that, I think cities and towns are going to have to be encouraged to do this and maybe given incentives to do this. They're not, try to change zoning and you have people understandably screaming. I mean, they tried to put a different kind of zone adjacent to where I live. I was the first one on the phone to my representative back then.
But you talked to the representative, or you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you could also talk to your local zoning commission that would have to approve it, correct?
Yes.
But if you have a czar in Providence who doesn't live
I don't think they're going to give him power to do anything. I think this is something to put in place to solve a problem.
Okay. I noticed, as an aside, I guess, that when Governor Raimondo was busily turning over spadefuls of dirt for apartments and condo projects, there wasn't any set-asides for affordable units in those.
Yeah.
Is that really? I don't understand. If there's a housing shortage, and especially affordable housing, when developers are being given tax incentives, especially if they're being tax incentives that they're not required to set aside parts of those projects for affordable. What's the logic of that?
There isn't any, and that's why I think we finally are going to look at the problem and try to tackle it.
Okay, so it's not just a matter of looking at communities like Bristol or North Kingstown and saying, well, you guys have restrictive zoning. I mean, there's issues in the urban areas too, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The legislature passed a bill that was signed into law by the governor requiring that all Rhode Island schools incorporate African heritage history education. And there was a working group formed under Governor Raimondo that developed a K through 12 curriculum for this history education. Now, as you know, several communities in the state, including Providence, are teaching critical race theory or a version of it. And in my own town, North Kingstown, the school committee created a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to spend tens of thousands of dollars to study whether racism exists in the district. When I went to the superintendent and pointed to this law, and he told me he was unaware of it.
The law for
that requires the teaching of African American or African heritage from K through 12, and there's a curriculum that's already been approved. He said he didn't know anything about it.
Is there a start date?
Well, yeah, there was, but even so, why? I guess my question is, it seems that this is, as Governor McKee said, it seems to be a step forward, but is this not being broadcast to the superintendent so that districts aren't spending tens of thousands of dollars for something that's, quote, already been fixed?
Well, as an educator, we legislate and ride mandates, mandates,
yeah.
Lots of things. And by the time it gets down to us, or we understand, we have to fully understand it. I think that's RIDE's responsibility to set the standards, to suggest a curriculum. A lot of times they'll just they have standards, and then the towns and the teachers set their own lessons up according to those standards. We'll have to see.
Okay.
But, you know, I don't even want to try to describe critical race theory, because I don't think any of us really understand it, and everyone you talk to has a different take on what it is or what it isn't. How I feel is we should teach our history. I mean, there are events that have happened,
That should be acknowledged.
and we acknowledge them, and we move on from there. I don't really understand the objection to teaching African American heritage or anything that's happened, especially Native American genocide. There's, things happened, and we have to acknowledge it and move on, so history doesn't repeat itself, as the old adage goes.
The website highlights that the General Assembly also created a permanent commission to promote and continually improve genocide and Holocaust education. What genocide are they referring to? The Armenian, or, I mean, it seems like the legislature creates all these commissions and sends them off to do whatever they're going to do, and nobody really follows up to see what they've done. A lot of commission reports just get put on the shelf, in other words.
Right. So I think that was put in place because of the different genocides that have happened. We have a very active Armenian community here, and that was I know that was heavily debated and objected to by Turkish population in Rhode Island. It happened. I think we just have to acknowledge it.
Okay. Just before Christmas, let me back up for a second. You cite the passage of what was called the Safe Schools Act that prohibits anyone from bringing a firearm on school property under, you had the heading child protection legislation. Rhode Island already had such a law, Rhode Island General Law 1147-60, which was passed in 2012, that already outlawed this. Why the need for a second law?
I don't know. You're talking about concealed carry in schools?
Well, no, it was called Safe Schools Act, and we were told that it was to prohibit anyone from bringing, with certain exceptions, of course, for law enforcement, bringing a firearm on school property. But there was already a law in the books that specifically said that you couldn't do it.
And I think what they wanted to make clear was that even a person with a concealed carry permit could not bring a firearm onto school property. Only a law enforcement person could do that. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, I think you're correct. And anyway,
I know it was an issue.
Yeah. Just before Christmas, a note was scribbled on the wall of girls' lavatory at Barrington High School, warning of a shooting to take place. And a sophomore girl went on social media with a petition that they go to distance learning because of this perceived threat. Police found no credibility for the note, but at the same time, social media proclaimed a message that declared December 17th, I think it was, as a mass shooting day. Oh. And today, teenagers are so influenced by social media that several school districts had to go to remote learning until Christmas break. So does passing these laws create a safer environment? Do the kids feel any safer because there's a law that's passed that call it the Safe Schools Act?
I don't think one has to do with the other. I think, we have a law that says you can't carry a gun in school, but somebody that wants to do it is going to do it, and that's a problem.
Okay. So why pass the law is the obvious question. If you know they're going to violate it anyway, why pass a law that says you can't do it? Well,
say I have a colleague that's a teacher who has a concealed carry permit. Do I want that teacher carrying a gun in school, unbeknownst to other people? I think that's where what they were thinking of. I don't think they were thinking of the incidents that you're saying.
Okay. I got to this one. We have about 5 minutes left, but your website said the Assembly approved the legislation. I don't know if that means it passed it, to make single-user restrooms in public places non-gender specific. Did this bill pass, and what does it aim at? Are all restrooms in public places going to become unisex? that was a very brief description on your website. I was
And
confused.
that was a press release sent out by the General Assembly on the accomplishments of the year, so that they are there, so there are non-gender specific restrooms in places. Is that so?
It said, the quote is, direct quote, "The Assembly approved legislation to make single-user restrooms in public places non-gender specific." So if you read that carefully, it would indicate that all restrooms are unisex.
So if you have a restroom and it's got one toilet and a door, instead of saying men or woman on it, it's anybody can go in there. You lock the door. It's one person.
Yeah, and what if
So
you have,
make them
what if there are multiple? I mean, it doesn't say anything
No,
about.
that's what I think that means.
Okay, well, that's why I was confused when I read this. What's going to happen here? The Nursing Home Staffing and Quality Care Act established minimum standard of 3.58 hours of resident care per day, which started this January 1st, and then it goes down up to 3.81 hours per day beginning next January 1st. Now, that sounds laudable as a goal, but if nursing homes cannot find enough qualified staff to meet these requirements, their only option is to decrease the number of people in the residence. So won't that just simply create a shortage of beds for senior people who need it?
We have a shortage of staff right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that they have to have almost 4 hours of care, I'm not even sure what that means, whether it means if they get physical therapy or occupational therapy, does that count as care, or are they just referring to CNAs and RNs that provide care, or what? I mean, these bills that get passed seem to have very general outlines, but when you try to get into specifics, they're not very clear.
I think it means general care.
Okay.
But I like I said, I'd have to read through the whole bill to see if occupational and physical therapy, is factored into that.
Okay. Every day, the state's daily newspaper has letters and opinion pieces claiming the cause of a group they advocate for, that they need a chunk of this COVID money. You've seen them. Now, the budget passed last year was about $3 billion more than the governor asked for. We've had both Democrat and Republican Senate representatives on this program who believe that the $13 billion is going to become the starting point for this year's budget. Do you agree with them?
We have this money, and I know we all want to spend it, but as Speaker Sakarchi said, there's for every, I think there's 5 billion asks for 1 billion money pot of money. I know, we haven't raised taxes in 2 years, and I think some of this money is the reason why. And that's why I think it's important to use this money and make an investment, so that we'll just have a spending spree. We can't do that. I'll have to see what the budget looks like when Governor McKee comes out with it, and then it goes to finance, and that's quite a process,
Yeah, I know.
If you've looked at, it's.
It always doesn't happen until about the last 3 days of the session.
And then you're trying to read everything at once. Yeah, it's difficult. I'm glad I don't sit on finance.
Are you going to run again this time?
I am going to run one more time. I said that the last time, but there's a few things I'd like to continue.
We have 30 seconds left. Give us an example of a few things you'd like to see accomplished.
Well, I'd like to see us make an investment in child care and pre-K. I'd like to see more money for fixing our schools. I mean, I worked in deplorable conditions for years, and
that's a high priority for you.
It's a high priority because they're not educationally adequate, and that's another thing. What's adequacy?
Yeah.
I think we need to make some progress on the goals for Act on Climate. I think especially we're a coastal state. We have to really look at that. So
we want to thank you for joining us, and we want to thank our audience for watching this edition of State of the State. And we hope you'll come back again.
I'll come back again.
Thank you.